Mortal Kombat's lore stretches for eons and eons. And since the lore is so expansive and deep, we can expect some characters to be forgotten about. Recently, I've been watching some lore videos of the older Mortal Kombat games so I can get a small refresher. And the more of these lesser known characters that I saw, the more interested I was. And so I began doing some research. I used Google, YouTube, the wiki page. I dug pretty deep. And the more that I watched, the more that I wanted to bring light to some pretty underrated characters. However, I reached a roadblock. Some of these characters that I find interesting or that I really liked as a kid, they just aren't that developed in the lore. For instance, Chameleon is considered one of Shao Kahn's deadliest warriors, and in Mortal Kombat Armageddon it says that he stayed behind in the shadows, basically just waiting for his time to come. Other than that, there's really nothing about Chameleon. And honestly, that's far too common for a lot of these characters, especially in the 3D era. I know that these characters aren't real people, I'm not dumb, but I genuinely started to feel bad. Of course, us as Mortal Kombat fans are going to forget about these characters because it seems like the Mortal Kombat writers did too. I went through hours and hours and hours of story mode playthroughs and research trying to discover more about some of these characters. Turns out it's difficult to appreciate the Kira and Cobras of the series whenever there's a Cabal-sized shadow looming over them. And so I made it simple for myself. Which characters did I enjoy playing with as a kid? As a kid, I would pick characters that I thought looked cool or unique. And that really helped me narrow it down. So I have a list of 3 characters that are completely underrated that you might have forgot about that should get some appreciation. And I would appreciate it if you'd like this video. It's free to do. It helps my channel out a ton. Also, if you like the idea of this video, please subscribe and check out my other videos. I just started this YouTube, but I think that you might really like the Mortal Kombat content that I'm putting out. And while you're down there, go ahead and comment some of your favorite lesser appreciated characters in the Mortal Kombat lore. I'd love to see it. The realms were created by the Elder Gods, done so by splitting the one being in 6 parts using the 6 Kamidogu. Each of these parts became their own realm. Earth realm, Nether realm, Outworld. Another one of the realms is called Sado, or Order realm. Sado is a realm where law, order, and structure prevails over everything. It's a highly advanced, really civilized realm that some would consider a perfect civilization. Sado is made up of Saiyans, who are human-like just like you and I, but they have a prioritization of order and structure. The structure of Sado is strictly enforced by the Saiyan Guard, so strictly that freedom isn't even allowed. See, in Sado, they think that freedom leads to chaos, and chaos leads to losing half of your face. But at least you get a modern Mortal Kombat roster spot. The Saiyan Guard is led by the first character on this list, Hotaru. Hotaru is obsessed with law and order. It's all he cares about. So much so that in Mortal Kombat Deception, Shujinko went to Sado, but it was past curfew. Shujinko didn't know about the curfew, but Hotaru told him that ignorance wasn't an excuse, and Shujinko ended up spending decades and decades in prison before he even saw a judge. The thing that's really interesting to me about Hotaru is not a hero. He's also not a villain. Hotaru is order. He's not going to pick the good side or the bad side. He's going to pick whichever side that he thinks is going to establish overall order throughout the entire realms. This is seen in Mortal Kombat Deception as well, with his support of Onaga the Dragon King returning. He believed that with Onaga merging all of the realms, that there will be absolute law and order throughout all of the realms. What's most interesting to me about this is historically in movies and games, law and order is seen as like a good guy trait. However, this is completely different. Hotaru doesn't care about good and evil. He just believes in order and having the best strip imaginable. Hopefully, since Havoc returned in Mortal Kombat 1, the next iteration of Mortal Kombat, we're able to see Hotaru. And I think it worked really well with Havoc taking such a prominent position in the Chaos Reigns DLC. Hotaru being the antithesis of everything that Havoc represents, I think it'd be really cool disposition to see. Also, Hotaru looks absolutely sick. Are you kidding me? Look at this. In In the Netherrealm, there are demons called Oni, and their only cause is to torment wandering souls. One of these Oni is actually the second character on this list, and his name is Draman. Centuries ago, Draman was a ruthless and powerful warlord in Outworld, and through his cruelty, he did multiple horrendous crimes to the people of Outworld, and so he got banished to the Netherrealm, where his soul and body is left to be tortured for the rest of forever. After years and years of torture, he lost all humanity and became completely insane. However, whenever he became insane, he just gave up and just gave his life to the Netherrealm. He accepted his fate and submitted himself to the Netherrealm and came back as an Oni. It doesn't really say where he got it, but he does have this mask called the Face of Kunlo, which takes his very brutal Oni style fighting and turns it into something very precise and focused and incredibly lethal. This actually gave him the nickname of Oni Tormentor, and it's legendary in Netherrealm. Draman and his fellow Oni, Moloch, actually play a pretty important role in Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. See, Quan Chi was stuck in the Netherrealm and he was having to deal with Scorpion being on side every single time that he crosses his path. One time, Draman and Moloch were actually passing by and saw it unfold. Quan Chi asked for them to help get rid of Scorpion, and so they did. They drove Scorpion off. Quan Chi, as repayment, offered to help them escape the Netherrealm. Now, Draman and Moloch never really cared about leaving Netherrealm. This is what they like doing. They're Onis. But the idea was very enticing for him. So they took him up on the offer and took him to an ancient ruins that was rumored to be a portal to other realms. After Quan Chi did some analyzing, he found out that the Shinnok amulet that he holds is actually used to open the portal. And then whenever Scorpion came back to be on site again, Quan Chi got out of there using that portal, but it didn't close in time for Scorpion to follow him to Outworld. Now, Draman and Moloch might be mindless Oni, but they're not dumb mindless Onis. They knew that Quan Chi was getting out of there without repaying his debt to them. So they got mad and followed him through the portal as well. Whenever they got to Outworld, Quan Chi was nowhere in sight, so they went on this murderous rampage until they were able to find Quan Chi. Shortly after this, the Deadly Alliance was formed, and Shang Tsung knew he couldn't completely trust Quan Chi, and so later on he found the Oni and promised them the opportunity to get their revenge on Quan Chi. All they had to do was just stay in his palace basement and get an unlimited amount of mortals to feed on. Then whenever Quan Chi does try to betray Shang Tsung, the Oni can have their way with him. However, the Oni never really got that opportunity. Whenever Shang Tsung and Quan Chi started bumping heads again, that's whenever Onaga returned. However, while the Oni were in the palace basement, Scorpion happened to go through there, and then whenever the Oni found him, they wanted to eat him, literally, and found out that they couldn't because he's a specter, and so instead they threw him into the Soulnado, assuming that he would be ripped to shreds based on the purity of the Soulnado. However, apparently that never happened and Scorpion remained intact. Now, we never see Draman return in the NRS era games. However, it would be really cool to see Draman return, maybe not as an Oni, but as a warlord in Outworld again. The reason why I say that is because Mortal Kombat 1 doesn't really ever specifically talk about the Netherrealm even existing. Not saying that it doesn't, but we need some kind of proof. But regardless, as a kid, I liked playing Draman because I thought it was funny that he would throw flies at people and it would do damage. I thought it was funny, but now knowing that he is a former warlord in Outworld turned into a tortured soul in the Netherrealm, turned into a legendary Oni, that is pretty cool in my book. Years before the events of the original Mortal Kombat, Shang Tsung owned a laboratory called the Flesh Pits. In these Flesh Pits, Shang Tsung used his dark magic to create creatures whose only cause was to do the bidding of Shang Tsung and Shao Kahn. From these Flesh Pits, we got the original likes of Melina, Scarlet, and then the third character on this list, Meat. Meat, somehow, during the experiment, gained sentience and realized the situation he was in and wanted to get out. After escaping the Flesh Pits, he somehow found his way to the Netherrealm, where he just chose to stay and hide. You could actually see him in Mortal Kombat Deception in the Netherrealm still hiding. Because of the dark magic that was used on him, Meat is completely immune to pain, and he has the power to regrow parts of his body that he loses. You could see this in his move list, where he takes his head off and then uses it as a bowling ball on the opponent. Not much is known about Meat, but I think what's most interesting about him is what we don't know, such as what happened in this experiment that kind of went wrong for Shang Tsung, because historically he's been really successful with Melina and Scarlet doing exactly what he wanted them to do, but whenever it came to Meat, something went wrong and Meat found out what was happening and wanted to get out of there. It's very unlikely that we ever see Meat again, and if we do, it's probably going to be flagged on YouTube in every single video that he's in. But it's kind of a shame that there's so much unknown about one of the most interesting characters in Mortal Kombat lore. Now, I almost didn't include Meat in this list just because of the lack of information about him, but I think that's what was most intriguing to me. However, I think that there might be a chance that Meat can return, because after all, despite Liu Kang's best efforts, Shang Tsung still created the flesh pits in Liu Kang's new era. So I think there might be a chance, a very low chance, but a chance that exists regardless. As a kid, I played these characters because I thought they looked cool or looked unique or was just something completely different than what I'm used to playing as. I didn't know at the time how underdeveloped their lore was or how detached from the main storyline they were. I didn't really care. But after doing research on these characters, even though they're underdeveloped, I think that they're very interesting. And if I never did this research, these characters that I just enjoyed as a kid, I never would have known so much about them and I wouldn't appreciate them as much as I do now. It added layers to these seemingly simple characters, and it made me think, what other characters did I kind of disregard before? Maybe I never played them because I didn't think they looked cool, but maybe if I do some digging, maybe I like them because of their lore. There's so many characters in the Mortal Kombat lore that I always disregarded as cannon fodder or jobbers, and maybe if I do a little bit of research, I can really appreciate them more. And realistically, maybe we aren't supposed to know more about these characters. Each of us has met somebody who was really important to our lore for a very short period of time, and then we part ways forever. That was the extent of their role in your story, and maybe the same can exist for these characters. Maybe Chameleon's role isn't meant to be deeper than hiding in the shadows waiting for his moment. Maybe that time will come, and maybe it won't. But now, after I did this research, I have a completely new appreciation for some of the lesser appreciated characters in the series that I love. I hope that one day in a future Mortal Kombat, NetherRealm Studios will bring these characters back like they did with Ashrah and Reiko. That'll give these characters an opportunity to play either a major or a minor role in the story, but also an opportunity to be fleshed out more so we could really appreciate them. And if it doesn't happen, honestly, that's fine. Not all nostalgia should be remade. But if they do, and I get to see Hotaru in 4K in all of his armored glory, my inner child would be very happy. This video was supposed to be about some cool characters that are pretty underappreciated in the Mortal Kombat lore, but it ended up being more than that. And I hope that you got out of it what I did, which is appreciation for all of the characters in Mortal Kombat and not just the household names. Not every character can have an iconic slogan like "Get over here," but we can still appreciate them for their moment in our history and the history of Mortal Kombat. Because even now, after all of these years, if me and you sat down and we played 100 games in Mortal Kombat Armageddon, you will never be able to beat my Meat.